Many of the staff members and trainers observed using mobile devices, but few of our users, when asked whether they haven't used mobile devices, actually did, so it's kind of mixed. Second, unsurprisingly, trainers report more of the internet-enabled mobile device usage among younger users and those in more populated and urban areas, and less so in the rural communities. Third, younger users do report answering more questions related to, asking more questions related to mobile devices. Fourth, staff impressions about overall usefulness of internet-enabled devices were kind of mixed. Some expressed genuine excitement, and others expressed more pessimism and concern. Finally, staff and trainers demonstrated a really strong genuine understanding of the trade-offs that come with pursuing a desktop model and more of a decentralized wireless focus. So I'm going to try to illustrate these with some quotes that we pulled from interviews. These quotes illustrate that, again, trainers and staff reported observed seeing mobile tablets and smartphone usage, but again, the users in the interviews didn't show that. So what we'd like to do is go to the data, right? We were able to at least illustrate strong mobile device usage at Strover Library, but that was the only site we were able to collect Wi-Fi data, which captures how many devices and which types of devices connect to the broadband. So looking forward, we'd like to maybe capture more of that data and be able to verify one way or the other. So right now it's kind of mixed and inconclusive. Next, so several of the staff members were quite excited about these types of tablets and smartphones. Many of them said, touchscreens are the future. They expressed an initial apprehension about tablets because they're intimidating in some way and induce anxiety. But once you can get them to overcome that barrier, they're actually more intuitive and easier to learn, and some were very optimistic. Also, laptops. As mentioned earlier, this idea of a mobile lab, being able to turn any room into a classroom, was observed by and reported by many of our trainers on the positive side. But on the other hand, others expressed some pessimism more generally and about mobile devices and specifically about the PCC's ability to utilize them. As really summed up quite nicely, it's crucial to have a good experience with broadband, and in the rural areas, broadband speeds maybe are more sporadic or slower, so that may turn off a lot of users to these types of technologies. Also, it's worth noting that several of the sites have actually experimented with tablets. They got 10 iPads and 10, I think it were Samsung tablets, and they gave them to users, and initially they were really excited. But once they found out that you couldn't take them home or have them, it kind of lost the personalization feature, which is a big part of their utility. So they eventually kind of lost interest. So they were, on the whole, more pessimistic about the center's ability to utilize them. And then also, several of the trainers or staff members reported that tablets are less productive. The desktop, you can get more work done in a shorter period of time, whereas tablets are more for entertainment. And then finally, regardless of whether you pursue a wireless strategy, training is going to be needed to provide just the full comprehensive service that these centers provide. And finally, we had a kind of a fun question where we had a hypothetical scenario and encouraged trainers to think more deeply about the future of public computing centers. And I was personally just genuinely impressed by the staff and trainers' general awareness of the trade-offs that come with either model, and whether you pursue a more brick-and-mortar type desktop model or, like, again, the decentralized approach where we try to diffuse more wireless signals, such as like the Rice Initiative in Houston. And I feel like this quote really hits the nail on the head. I mean, I had an undergraduate teacher who always, like, whenever you got somebody got something right, she tapped her nose, and that's what I did right here. He just hits it. I mean, I really should have just showed the slide and sat down because with limited resources, somebody's going to get left out. You know, mobile strategies probably favor younger users on the whole, while the desktop model likely favors older users and those inconvenienced by transportation. These decisions are hard from a macro perspective, and it's very difficult not to think. That's all I have. Now I'd like to introduce Xiaochen, my colleague, who's going to discuss some of the user findings.
Sharon. So next we're going to focus on our user data. So we will show the findings mostly related to the digital literacy and help and train the users and to get, and also how the users get to the site and what kind of the motivations why they want to use the centers. So first I'm going to talk about the digital literacy issues. As we know, based on previous studies, the digital divide initial focus was the access divide. However, because of the wide penetration of the computers and the internet, and the focus on the digital divide actually shifted more to the digital literacy and usage divides. That's why we want to focus on this critically important issues of digital literacy. So we asked the users to first self-assess their digital literacy levels, mainly focusing on computers and the internet skills, by providing them with 3 levels to choose: the beginners, the intermediate, and also the knowledgeable. After that, we further asked the users to identify what kind of computer and internet tasks that they can or cannot accomplish. So the skills articulated by the users themselves are listed in this table. So I categorize them into 4 types of skills. The first one is the basic computer skills, and the next one is the information processing application skills, mainly referring to how they can use Word, Excel, and also PowerPoint. And the next one is the internet information skills, basically referring to how they can surf the internet. And the last category is the internet communication skills. So this skills focuses more on the emails and also how they can use the social network sites, especially the Facebook and MySpace, since they are pretty popular nowadays. So, and these skills listed here, reflecting both their computer and internet skills, they not only reflect their digital literacy levels, but also the needs in terms of what they want to learn from coming to the computer centers. So, as for the beginners, most of them claim that they still have problems with the basic computer skills, especially how to type and how to copy and paste and how to use the browsers to surf the internet, let alone other types of computer, Word and PowerPoint, Excel skills, and also internet information and communication skills. So from this quote, we can see that this person claimed that the computer is something that is completely new for him. As for the intermediates, most of them claim that they didn't have much issues with the basic computer skills. They know how to use the internet to serve the things that they want to know. However, the skill set, they have some problems with using emails, especially how to attach a document in the emails. As for the knowledgeable people, they claim that they don't have any big problems with the basic computer skill, the internet information and communication skills. They pretty much know how to use the social network site. But a lot of them claim that they only have very limited knowledge of how to use Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, as clearly shown in this book. So from this chart, we can see that The users at the three levels are almost evenly distributed across the different types of computer centers. However, we should notice the fact that even the self-assessed knowledgeable people, their computer and internet skills are really limited compared to other people who usually have higher socioeconomic status and who probably have more access to computers either at home or at other locations. So that's why we see that because of this particular group of population who are usually less educated, and more than half of them are below the poverty line, as shown in the previous demographic slides, we can conclude that there's still like a huge gap in the digital literacy. That's why we need some more solutions to bridge this gap. So next, I'm going to talk about what kind of help and training the users can get from coming to the public computer centers. As we know that, based on previous studies, providing the users with simple access to computers and the internet is definitely not enough to bridge the digital literacy gaps. That's why they definitely need the help from the trainers. And also we noticed that the help and training they need is not only focusing on the computer and internet skills, but also other types of social skills. So in terms of what kind of help the user can get, they can get help basically from the trainers and the staffs and also other users. So in terms of the help they can get from the trainers, there are two models. The first one is a one-on-one help. I use the word help instead of training. It is because that this type of teaching is less structured and usually more flexible, completely tailoring to the user's specific needs. And the second model is the class-based training. This model is much more structured and usually less flexible, so which is different from the first model. And from the one-on-one help, users can learn both technological and non-technological skills. So in terms of the technological help, the users generally get help with basic computer skills in terms of how to type, how to copy and paste, and occasionally how to use the printer. And they also ask help from the trainers in terms of how to set up an email and Facebook account. Occasionally, they ask help for GED application because we noticed the fact that GED completely shifts from this previously offline version to this current online version. And last, the most help the users seek from the trainers are actually job related. They want to know how to use the computer and the internet to search for and apply for jobs online, and also how to use the Word, especially to build up a resume. So the non-technological help the users get is more related to the GED and also the general job application process. So from the class-based training, the other model, we found that the users usually attended classes in terms of how to type and how to use the PowerPoint, Excel, and also the Word, and also how to use the browser to surf the internet. They also attended classes which is non-technological for their language and GED training, especially the English as a second language training, because most of the population probably are not the people whose first language is English. So, in terms of the help they can get from the users, we notice that it is really limited. So the users occasionally interact with each other to seek help for computer and job-related information. The reason might be explained in this quote. A lot of them believe that they think other users are pretty much focusing on their own stuff. So it's not okay for them to interact with other people. So it's better for them to get help from the trainers directly, who they are really appreciated of. Okay, after looking at all the one-on-one help model and also the class-based training model, we found that most of the users seeking help from this informal one-on-one help model, and only a limited number of the people we interviewed actually attended the class. So the findings shown above that the users usually get a lot of help for job purposes is actually associated with their employment status. So more than half of the users we interviewed claimed that they are not employed. They are still looking for a job. That's why we can also notice the fact that quite a large number of the users who want to learn or who actually learning the computer and internet skills in these public computer centers just want to use the skills to seek for jobs. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the skills the user feel that they are improved through coming to this public computer centers. So the first type of the skills they are improved are the computer and internet skills. As shown in the first quote, this person claimed that after coming to the public computer centers, he learned how to copy and paste, and also he learned how to email. And in the second quote, we noticed that some of the users, by only accessing more to the computers that are provided in this public computer centers, they are pretty much more familiar with this computer and internet. But these kind of like users compared to the users who get help from the trainers are much less. So the other type of skills the user feel are improved are mostly job related. So they learned how to write a more effective resume and how to seek and apply for jobs both online and offline. So that's all my talk about this issue. And next, I'll introduce my colleague Preeti to talk more about how the users use the site and what are their motivations.
Thank you. We are slowly inching towards lunchtime. There will be conclusions and recommendations soon. But before that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the various factors that contribute to the way users interact with the sites and how they use it. I'd like to begin with talking about the built environment. The built environment, as we understand it, is a little more than the mere architecture and design. What it refers to is the spatial and material culture that begins to build around the use of physical spaces. Now, this photograph that you see is of Arch, which is the homeless shelter in Austin. And this is a typical scene that you would observe if you visit Arch at any point of time during the day. You'll notice a lot of groups of people standing outside and just doing their own thing. And this is because Arch has an elaborate security system, and they can only have a certain number of people inside the premises at any given point in time. So the others have to wait outside. They have to await their turn to go inside. And which is why a lot of stuff happens when groups of people get together. And if you notice the quote, this quote is of a former homeless person who is now a part of the staff at one of the sites. And what he says was that he was really scared and intimidated the first time he went to Arch. And he said it's a pity because there are a lot of good resources inside, but the groups of people standing outside, which includes drug dealers and people just shooting the breeze, can be intimidating for somebody to even try and attempt to enter the building. So this is an instance of how the built environment can sometimes inhibit people from actually accessing resources which can be of very good use to them. But it's not always negative. There are also positive ways in which built environments function. And here is a quote from a user of the Bastrop library. And this particular user had a very interesting take on why he began to use computers at the public library. And he said the first time that I walked into the library, I saw that most of the consoles, most of the computer workstations in the library were occupied by teenagers. And I'm a former teacher. And this really pleased me. It made me happy. It made me feel that if the teenagers are using computers, then there obviously is some utility to it. So which is why I got onto the computers too, and I began using it. So another instance of how the built environment dynamic actually feeds into the way people even begin to adopt technology. No matter what dynamic, good or bad, of the built environment, one feature that we notice throughout is that all of the sites are very wedded to the social context of the user population there. So for instance, if you're looking at rural library sites, they already typically serve as very important social hubs for the users. Many of the residents have grown up seeing the library, visiting the library throughout their years for various purposes. This is a quote from a user at Lockhart Library, and she says, we love going to the library because our kids love coming there. And as previously discussed, the youth population is one of the major drivers of usage at these sites. And she said that whenever we meet residents, we tell each other that, hey, I'm going to the library, let's catch up there. And the library really is a very important part of the interaction that residents have with each other. We meet up with each other a lot at the library. For the urban sites, the dynamic is slightly different. Because a lot of the population that the urban sites serve are low-income populations, the homeless, the ex-offenders, we have to understand that cities really present very limited choices to where these people can go and what they can do. Especially for the ex-offender population. Some of the ex-offenders I spoke to told me that they are allowed to be out of their transitional home only for 8 hours a day. They cannot access public library facilities because it's out of bounds for them, so they cannot access the internet there. So in such instances, the computer sites really become a kind of a safe haven for them. So this is a quote from a user at Mission Wilby, and my colleague Brian was interviewing them, and he presented a hypothetical situation to this user, and he said, what if we gave you internet at home? Would you still come to this place? And this user said, yes, of course, it's because of the environment. It's violence-free, it's drug-free, it's a place that I feel really safe in. So this is an instance of how these sites provide value to users even beyond their immediate technology needs. The next question is, how do users even access these sites? For the rural library users, this is a typical quote that we saw. I live around 4 miles, I live around 2 miles, I generally walk to the library or I drive to the library. So these are two things that users at the rural sites were generally doing. But keeping this quote in mind, it's also important to note that what if a user, what if somebody in the rural population does not have access to his own vehicle, or he does not stay at walking distance from the site? It means that this is completely out of bounds for him, or he has to be dependent on somebody else to help him access the library. The urban population is very dependent on public transport. So it affects the frequency and the duration of the visit. And this is an interaction I had with a user at Divity, and this is a question that we pose to all users: how do you generally get to the site? And this is a typical quote from somebody who's looking for a job, that yes, it does take me a very long time to get to the site. Not everybody stays on bus routes which are easily accessible and which will take you to the library. People sometimes have to switch buses, so it affects the frequency and duration. Yes, I would like to come here more often, but I cannot because I know I have to do a million other things. And if I have to get, and I'm completely dependent on public transport, so even for the other errands that I have to run, I have to still take the bus, and they're all spread out all over the city. All my tasks are not concentrated in any one particular location. So their dependency on public transport really affects how frequently they would visit a site and how long the duration that they would be at the site. So what happens when they actually visit the site? Once they get inside the site, we found out that the working hours of the site affects the traffic, and we found a lot of preference, especially in the urban areas, for weekend hours and also for late evening hours. And this especially came up when we would ask them, so do you know that there are training classes offered? Would you like to avail of them? And they would say, yes, of course, I would like to be a part of the training class, but it's not offered at a convenient time because during the daytime, I'm out looking for a job. So if I'm out looking for a job during the daytime, how can I attend training classes? If it was perhaps offered after working hours, after normal business hours, then maybe I would have been able to enroll in it, but not otherwise. This wasn't restricted only to the urban area, as this quote would demonstrate. This is a report from on a user at Balwade. And this user visits the library on average 3 days a week, which is pretty good. But she would like to visit more, but she cannot because the library is shut on Fridays and not on the weekends, and obviously the computers are not accessible at that point in time. There are also time limits on use, and this is not as much as a concern in the rural area, but is definitely a concern at the urban sites, because many of these urban sites have very limited space. Arch and Trinity especially come to mind. And shorter time limits are not conducive to job search. This was an interaction we had with a user at Haven for Hope, which is the homeless shelter in San Antonio. And we asked him why he preferred using computers only in a particular space at the Haven for Hope complex. And he said, because I get stuck sometimes when I'm filling out a form, and a job search is a lengthy process. There are so many leads to follow. So if I sit in a space in the complex where time limits are enforced, that breaks my concentration, because I may be in the middle of doing something really important, and then I will be asked to leave, and that's not something which is really conducive for job search. And the trainers and the staff at the sites are aware of this, which is why we found that at some urban sites where time limits have to be enforced so that a larger population can access the computers, trainers would usually tell them, if it is job search that you're really interested in, go on to Divity. They have longer time limits. They'll allow you to use the computer for a longer time, and that would be more conducive for your purpose. We also asked users what motivated them to visit the site, and these are the different scenarios for the rural users. These are the reasons why a rural user would come visit the library to access the computers. They may either have no internet access at home or limited, and by limited we mean either through mobile internet, or even if they do have internet connection at home, it's probably dial-up and it's really slow, which greatly limits what they can do and how long they would take doing that thing. They probably don't have access for desktop or any kind of devices which would allow them to access the internet at home. They probably don't know how to execute certain tasks, which means they need help from trainers, and help is available at the library, which is why they would go there. There are training classes offered at the library, and they may choose to enroll in those. And of course, the children want to use the computer, so in many cases, it's the children who pull along the parents to use the computers at the library, because I need to do my school homework, so I want to go to the library. The parent has to accompany, they have to drive the child, and that's how they begin using the computers themselves. These are the different scenarios for the urban user. Help from trainers ranks topmost, because as has previously been discussed, this population is composed of ex-offenders, of the homeless population, who probably have been out of touch with what is current in technology for a very long time. So they need help from trainers to execute their tasks. Job search is obviously high on their priority list too. There are printing facilities available at these urban sites, and they need to print resumes, they need to do a lot of things. So that's another reason why they visit these sites. They come in for computer GD training classes, because GD has to be taken online now, so they need training, they need to familiarize themselves with the technology to be able to do that. General internet use, social media, they want to download music and carry it on their MP3 player, they want to stream videos. And other resources offered by the site, that's last but not the least, most certainly, because free meals, hot breakfast, facilities to shower, mailboxes, free bus passes, all of them are a very huge component of why people visit sites in the first place. For many of them, housing is a concern. For many of them, getting certificates is a concern, documenting their existence is a concern, and these sites offer resources for all of that. So that's what brings them in, and once they're in, they see computers are available too, and then they get onto the computers and begin using it. Another question that we asked users is, what if this facility was not available for you? What if we were to take it away from you? What would you do? Where would you go? For the rural user, the alternative sites that they suggested was perhaps go to Starbucks or Schlotzsky's or McDonald's. Some of the rural users, some of the rural sites also had Texas workforce sites, so they said they'll probably go there. But there are conditions for use. Even though the user is aware that internet is available at these places, all of them cannot access it, because the conditions are that A, you have your own device. If you do not have your own device, the Wi-Fi is of no use to you. You also need to pay for food or coffee to be on the premises. You cannot just walk into Starbucks and sit there and not purchase anything. You also need to be proficient at some level in what you want to do, because there's going to be no help available at these particular sites, whereas help is available at the library sites. For the urban user, access to devices, internet, and limited help without payment is available. So if these sites are taken away from them, they can still go to the city libraries and the Texas workforce. Help is available at both these places, but the consistent feedback that we got from users is that the help is qualitatively very different from the kind of help that they would get at the sites, because the staff and the trainers at the sites are willing to work one-on-one with them, customize training to their particular needs, which is something that they will not be able to access. Again, Starbucks, Schlotzsky's and McDonald's also exist as options for the urban user, but purchase is a tacit condition for acquiring internet access there. Given the kind of population that comes to these sites in the urban areas, they do not have the purchase power to really frequent these sites or even own their own devices. Finally, moving into conclusions and recommendations. The first conclusion that we reached when we looked through our data is the project is really reaching a very diverse population. And this is mainly because it's very well demarcated between the rural areas and the urban areas, with the rural areas serving libraries. Now, why people access these sites in the rural areas? Because their needs are related to speed and to access. Whereas in the urban areas, these sites serve specific populations, specific constituencies, and their needs are more related to tasks. So the urban user is not really bothered about is it fast or slow. For them, the mere fact that the device is available to them and it is connected to the internet is a sufficient enough draw. Also, training and classes. Many users are interested in highly specific tasks. Nobody walks into a site saying, I want to become an expert in the use of Microsoft Office Suite. No, for them, it's extremely fragmented. It's very here and now, in the here and now. I want to copy paste this at this point in time, so I need help with that and nothing else. I don't need to know anything else. I want to learn how to format my resume, so please tell me only that. So their needs are in the moment. It's extremely micro. They do not have these lofty aims of, I want to begin coding and I want to start blogging and I want to start tweeting. That does not happen. We notice that social media also plays a very important role in clients' engagement, and this is something that we observe with the ex-offender population and the homeless population who may have fallen out of touch with the social network that they were connected to. And so finding these people back again on Facebook or on other social media is a big draw for them. It is very fulfilling. And this is something the trainers told us too, that probably introducing them to social media and seeing their face light up when they actually are reunited online with a loved one is extremely gratifying and extremely satisfying. All of the users said that they highly value the one-on-one training because, the staff and the trainers are really the last mile connectors, and as we discussed in the methodology, we visited 18 sites. We got 14, our team was composed of 14 people, including 2 of our professors, and not one of us returned with any kind of feedback that was even remotely negative about the staff and the trainers of these sites. So, it's highly commendable. Completely. Talking about the organization and how the PCC functions, the whole project functions as an organization, it's extremely rich in resources, and not only is it rich in resources, but it is also willing to share these resources with others. This operates on 2 levels. At a very micro level, as my colleague Lauren mentioned, that if a site is not for some reason able to serve a client's needs, they know where to direct the client. So that happens at a very micro level, but that also can operate at a very macro level. For instance, in the city of San Antonio, the city pays the utility bills of a particular institution because the professors and the teachers and the instructors of that institution come and run classes for that particular computer site. So this kind of resource sharing and collaboration is something that we found in the organizations, and which is again a very good thing. Again, we cannot overemphasize and underscore enough the commitment and the enthusiasm of the staff, because they really are the drivers of the program. As far as outreach and marketing goes, word of mouth seems to work across the board, and the word of mouth can vary and differ. It happens in various different cases. Sometimes it happens through case managers, because the ones who work with the homeless and the ex-offender population already know where to direct their client. So that is an instance in which word of mouth works. Another instance is probably peer-to-peer. So these are the 2 instances in which word of mouth may work. Again, many children and teens using facilities. Perhaps the grant did not state that the explicit target population that they were trying to reach were teens or children, but this is something that we saw. All of us, when we were visiting the sites, especially in the rural areas, noticed that children were actually making very active use of of these facilities. There's a lot of literature that says that mobile technologies are actually the bridge between introducing users to internet. They are actually bridging the connectivity gap. But as far as our data goes, we did not have very strong evidence to speak to it. Of course, there were traces of it, but we found that we had more evidence coming in from the staff than from the users. So we do not have data to really speak to the role that mobile technologies could play in bridging the connectivity gap. Finally, recommendations. Our first recommendation is about metrics and accountability. We could do with a stronger system which would tell us about referrals and repeat users and new users and whether they return or not. So Ben also spoke about the role of usage, but maybe a more robust system there. Put resources where needed most. An observation that we made when we visited sites was that some sites had underutilized resources while some sites really required more machines and more staff. So maybe try and balance it out and see where the lacuna really exists and kind of divert resources to these sites which really need them. Perhaps address transportation challenges by having sites spread out over locations and having only one site at one particular location and have all the users come there. Perhaps explore new opportunities and new locations in the city to open up new sites. Identify and attract new potential beneficiaries. We are already working with a very targeted set of population. We have senior citizens, immigrants, the homeless, the ex-offenders. Perhaps try and see if there are more constituencies in need of sites and facilities like this. As far as increasing volume of users and getting people to come into the site and begin using the facilities, we found that one size does not fit all. It is something that the computer sites are already doing. They know that they have to adapt and customize their offerings to the population that they are serving. So it's not really a big revelation. They're already doing that. We just urge continued attention to that because that's a good thing. That's obviously something that needs to continue. And lastly, we'd also like to talk about broadening definitions of legitimate usage. This is something that we saw in a few sites, not across the board, but social media seemed to be discouraged and there was more stress towards, no, these computers have to be only used for job search and for nothing else. And users have different needs, they have different motivations to use technology. So perhaps try and take that into consideration and not have this very overwhelmingly bias in favor only of job search. While that is important, we recognize that it is important, but equally there are resources also available on social media, and if users need to access those resources, then they should be encouraged because that kind of access also leads to a lot of learning and also leads to adoption of its own kind, which feeds into more learning recursively. So these are the 4 recommendations that we have. Finally, this is a photograph of Haven for Hope, and we'd just like to mention that regardless of where these sites are located, each of these sites are symbols of hope in their own way to the constituency that they serve and the communities that they serve. And we'll now open up the floor for any questions that you would like.
I wonder if we could have the group come up.
Behind schedule right now, but and we could go on and on as we have in classes for hours about any one of these
And arguing.
observations. But we'd like at least to take 5 or 10 minutes for your immediate questions, and then the group is of course going to be around all day. Yes, in the back.
I have a twofold question. In going through these centers, one thing that wasn't mentioned is storage of information. So I'm a repeat user to a certain center, and I may go to another center. Nothing was meant about storage. And the other one is the personal information that you put in. How is that protected? Is that covered anywhere in the way the centers are run?
Class? Someone want to step forward on that?
I think one of the things that we did see, speaking with some of the users, was that they were not that familiar with bookmarks. They wanted to visit a site multiple times online, but they didn't know how to do that. So that was a challenge we ran into. And also, as far as storing information, we didn't really see much familiarity with things like Google Drive or other bookmarking sites online that you can access from different types of devices. I mean, that's a change that we saw.
Do they ever recommend USB storage or?
They do, some sites in the urban areas also give out free USB devices to their clients, so that is something that they highly recommend. Most certainly.
And I spoke with some trainers who said that they would teach people who would come in about a USB drive and how if they had a resume that they were working on, they should save it on there because it would just be erased from the computer once they were done.
Some users did have trouble keeping track of their USB drives as well, so some sites would actually charge a fee for you. If you lost your USB drive, you have to pay to get it back, and that was to hope to encourage people to keep better track of their drives.
And in terms of passwords, just really quickly, one, users tended to forget a lot of their passwords, so that was kind of a big thing, is recreating accounts over and over again. And two, again, security, the information is erased generally at the end of every day, so it's not going to be saved there.
But there are also some users kind of get concerned about their privacy issues. That's why they think probably other users will observe what they are doing, so that's why they're kind of scared of using the computers for their own needs that much, so that's also their concern.
Ricardo, you have a question?
Yes, I'm Ricardo Gomez at the University of Washington, and I have a question or a comment. If you start with the question, and it's building up on this, how you're dealing with the training in privacy and security issues, because that's something that we're finding as well as very, very needed in the very basic entry-level training on security and privacy. But leaving that, I'm just blown away. I'm fascinated by the level of depth and breadth of the study that you did and the model that you used carrying this through over 2 semesters with this fantastic group of students. It's amazing. Congratulations.
Alan, I think you had a question too.
Yes,
And
Alan.
then we'll pause for answers.
Alan, American Library Association, Washington office. So whenever I hear things like this, I agree, it's fantastic. I always think of how it can be used to get, well, to be crass, to get more money. So it probably won't be another era or BTOP. I mean, you never know. So I think of getting money in terms of particular places in the federal government or perhaps in the state government. So for example, having an analysis of breakdown by PCC type. For example, the public housing units. How can you use that information to convince HUD that this is a good thing that they should invest in? I'm just wondering if the class is thinking about a write-up, or in the write-up, this kind of policy thinking and recommendation, and how it would be targeted to decision makers.
So 2 questions, privacy and then
That's
targeting
right, security,
specific.
privacy, and using it to get more residential, I think was the question, right?
Well, one idea and one thing that we saw in like 1 or 2 sites was kind of building off of what's been talked about as the word of mouth. So again, that's relying on users to spread the word, but kind of maybe making it a more active system. So saying, okay, if you bring in 10 or 15 friends, like we'll reward you with something, and maybe you can kind of partner with businesses or something. I know that was done with one user who came in, and if you put in so many hours at the center, you get a computer. And there could be some way to kind of, if you know, a business sort of gets some marketing out of it by saying like they're sponsoring an event. And again, sponsorship is one way that's been commonly used across a lot of nonprofits and libraries to kind of sponsor building something, is getting your name, you know, getting your business's name on there. But again, I think that building off of that word of mouth, so many users said that they came in for that, but if there was some sort of active way to engage users and even encourage them, users who maybe aren't spreading the word as actively, to do so, that could be something to do. Again, talking, you know, not all the users are employed, we had about half and half, so, you know, at their businesses, saying like, I really like this center, I wonder if we could partner to do a fundraising event or something like that. I think the users, again, are really, could be utilized more heavily to kind of spread that word, since they are the recipients of the center and can speak best to the use of it.
And then as far as how to encourage, HUD and housing residents to incorporate more computers and internet connectivity, I think you have to work on how to sell that. And a lot of these centers the people were using it more for entertainment because they weren't working, maybe they had mental or physical disabilities that prohibited them from working. So I think that's, in some cases, might be a harder sell, saying, you know, these, we can put 2 computers in there, they might mainly be used for entertainment. So I guess sort of shifting that from jobs to more of this sort of secondary benefits of having technology.
In regard to the first question, security and privacy, I spoke with the primary tech specialist at Mission Milby, and that was his primary concern. I asked him what types of issues he deals with. He says, if any, it's viruses and malware and such as that. He gets, remember, if the computer goes down and a trainer can't fix it inside, it goes to him. He constantly encourages the trainers and the staff members to do updates, but transferring that down to the users, it's complicated because of the heterogeneity of the user. Like, there's such wide levels. We can get people who don't know how to use a mouse to try to get them to understand, like, the privacy and security concerns. It's a more deeper level, and I understand that's important, but I think that's definitely should be a focus moving forward, is trying to maybe build that into the understanding and the training. But I definitely compliment your comment that it is a concern of them. But I don't think we've really come up with tangible solutions towards that.
I would say one more thing in terms of maybe being able to make a pitch to Hunt or something like that from maybe findings like, oh, this is a finding it really would lead to people who believe like, hey, we really need more resources in some of these areas for public computing. I actually had one interview that I did at the Arch Center where actually a couple different users separately told me, oh yeah, they were friends with one of the trainers on Facebook. And she actually would post occasionally when she'd seen a help wanted sign somewhere out and about in Austin. Hey, I want to check this place out, so and so. And actually, that was an example, I think, of something that's happening in the center, going on after the people had left the center. If they didn't, check Facebook elsewhere, they didn't have Facebook access. Maybe the next time they came to the center, but an ongoing thing, which again, that social networking thing we talked about, that actually even comes into the job search, I think, indirectly. The connection that people are making or remaking, maybe old friends of theirs, hey, that tell them about jobs. If you're trying to connect this kind of underserved population with these job opportunities, I think there's actually in our research a number of examples of ways in which indirectly or directly connections were made, which I think policymakers would find pretty interesting. So I saw 3 questions. This young lady, and then John and Laura. I see another one in the back. So we'll get. Yes.
So at the beginning of the presentation, you guys talked about how the UK had at first distributed a bunch of computers and then later added training. Did you find evidence that they realized specifically as a government, a funding government, that they had to do the training in order to make that work? Did you find that? Is that why they added
it was
training?
more low level. I think it was something that developed at the individual sites, that once they had the computers and they had the access, then they found that the users were demanding more services. And I think that just kind of evolved site by site, and then that kind of bubbled up through the network. So the online centers is actually a relatively small organization itself, even though they cover 3,800 centers. The actual organization for the online centers is only about 28 people. So I think once they start hearing reports from the field about, we're starting to see more demand for services and stuff like that, I think then that starts to get disseminated throughout the organization.
John Horgan, I'm a graduate of the LEJ school and a veteran of several PRPs, and so let me just say that you guys did an excellent job with this one, so congratulations on that. My question has to do with whether any of the national programs to promote adoption, like Connect to Compete, Internet Essentials, I know Time Warner Cable has something like Internet Essentials that may not be labeled out. Did any of those programs try to market to clients in these centers, or did any of these programs register at all in the work you did in terms of efforts to get people online?
Did anybody ever use those?
I hadn't heard about that until I read an article in the paper a couple of weeks ago, the big push from Connect to Compete with their new website and support from the Ad Council. But before that, I hadn't heard anything. And I know they're doing ads on TV, radio, and even online, which my team is
Connect to Compete not even publicly announced till March 22nd or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. But Internet Essentials and other things like that from cable providers have been around for longer than that.
Right.
That's also, we kind of like recommend there probably the computer center can expand the partnership with other types of organizations because we just like mentioned previously, so they kind of like cooperate with Microsoft and also other types of like organizations, but the kind of like number of the organizations are still limited. That's why we also recommend for the sites to cooperate with, diverse organizations in order to not only get the sources, but also get the funding.
But I think your question really underscores how kind of fractured this terrain is. There are organizations, there are facilities, there are resources, I should say, but having both the time and the expertise and the knowledge to knit them into the fabric of an already, in many cases, overburdened site, that's a task.
And comment on John's question, do any of the programs, I know Universal Service requires a physical address at USAC, but do any, don't all of the subsidy programs require a physical address? And doesn't that necessarily just drop out all of the homeless or people without addresses? Which then this, and does anybody know of a program as a subsidy program that actually a homeless person can use?
So you're talking about individual subsidies now?
Yeah, because a lot of those are individualized. The Connect to Compete is a subsidy or a self-made subsidy to a physical address or a user.
Right.
Universal Service is designed to go to an individual user with an address. All of them that I know of have address requirements. And as the FCC starts reforming this, is this sort of maybe a way to answer his question that was the crass question about getting money? Is this a way for organizations that support people without addresses to really say, well, we need some of that too, as well?
Physical address.
I know Trinity at the homeless shelter, which is part of the St. David's Church, it allows the homeless people to receive their mail there, but I don't know if that would stand instead of an actual physical address, which would be their home, but that's the only.
Some of, I do know that in the case of the, what's the Connection to Connect Texas, the Clearwire project or opportunity. If you've got one address that's already using that opportunity, then you can't register another address there. So a number of homeless shelters do receive mail for their clients, but only one person with that address at that location can take advantage of that opportunity.
So, Laura, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, we have two very patient people. Stay patient. We'll be with you. Okay.
To further answer your question, my name is Lori Williams. I'm at Austin Freenet. I'm the Director of Programs and Training there. And we have just started a partnership with the Homeless Information Management System. So when people come into the Arch, our big homeless center, they're automatically registered with unique identifiers. Our classes are listed within that system. So, and I think there are 22 other nonprofits and service agencies around the city that also have their clients in there. So those case managers and all of that from all of those nonprofits around the city can see our offerings and actually register their clients into our classes if they need to, and then we provide tracking information so they can check on them to make sure that not only are they showing up, but that they're learning, and then the HMIS system will eventually tell us when they stop becoming homeless, and so we'll be able to report on outcomes as well.
Two more questions, and then we're going to be able to continue this over lunch. Laura.
This is really a comment, and I have not tested this software myself, but there are online courses that you can take that are geared for lower literacy, less experienced adults about privacy, security, and that kind of thing. So you could look on digitalliteracy.gov or the curriculum that Goodwill designed, which is called gcflearnfree.org, and I believe you will find a number of examples of ways that people can learn to protect themselves online.
Very patient young lady.
Thank you very much. First of all, congratulations, an excellent, excellent study and all the hard work. But I'm curious, I mean, over and over you mentioned the uniqueness in terms of the people power, the training specialist, the unique model of this one-on-one that's tailor specific. But I'm curious, did you talk to like the program, the PCCs themselves, the scientist directors, to find out what would happen if those sites, if those people were not there anymore? For example, libraries, they're not going to go away. The computers are still going to be set there. But what's going to be different, because these are nonprofit entities that have the people power there, the training specialists there. Would they feel it if that type of training would no longer be there to impact their communities, rural and urban?
Yes, compared to the PCCs with the libraries, because we definitely asked the question like, because some of the people mentioned that besides coming to the public computer centers, they also go to the libraries. But some of the users mentioned that with the libraries, they can only, just use the computer, they can get very limited help. Usually probably just like how to set up this stuff. So that kind of like help is not structured, and also it's not like tailoring to the user specific needs. That's why they think it's more, feel much, better for them to come to the PCCs. Because most of them, their digital literacy levels and also other type of social skills are pretty low. That's why they want to get the help from the trainers. And also, they also mentioned that instead of going more to the classes that I just talked about in this public computer centers, probably they need more help from this one-on-one person, because usually you don't have like a plan of what I want to do. So they just come and you think, okay, I probably want to look for a job, so I probably want to just like ask a person to help me build up my resume, for example. That's why they just want to the trainer to tailor to their specific needs.
And to answer your question again, like that's something that we discussed, as Sharon just mentioned, but having an exit strategy, that's something that wasn't, maybe we weren't asking the right questions to kind of get to that answer.
Well, I was just wondering what the direct, because the partnerships are with other nonprofit agencies, et cetera. Would they miss not having a specialist?
So let me just hazard one observation based on sort of the staff interview, and I think I may be wrong, the class can correct me on this, since they did many more interviews than I did, but the thing I vividly recall was sort of asking about precisely this issue at a rural library, and the answer I got was that for trainers, they basically have two sources of trainers. One was sort of the professional staff that the Texas Connects Coalition provided, and the other was largely a volunteer staff. And the library personnel's function was mainly to screen volunteer trainers. And quality control was a real issue for them. That's what they said. That sort of getting people in who know something about computers, who can function reliably as trainers, as volunteers, is not so easy. Which squares with what we've been hearing here, right? And so, yeah, I think that's an issue. Trainers and training and human resources to do it in a volunteer environment is going to be an issue.
I think my observation, I went to several sites, is that there was uneven integration of the specific sites into the overall project, and there was a learning curve associated with that. For example, one key staff member told me that he had to really convince some set of sites to keep their doors to the lab open when there wasn't a trainer there, to just make it available to people who wanted to wander in, because they just weren't comfortable with that. They were worried about theft or something, something breakage, but he ultimately did convince them to just keep the lab open, whether there's a staff person. So there's a learning curve, I think, on the part of these settings where the sites organize their resources.
Yeah, and I can add to that. The staff, I think most of the sites we went to, the staff was absolutely essential to people going to the sites. I talked to many users who actually had computers at home, but they just didn't know how to use them. And so the access to the training is the actual key that's bringing a lot of these people in over and over again. It's not just the access to the computers.
And also, I want to add that because I definitely, in an interview like John in the Lockhart. He's also like the staff from the Texas School, because that's a Lockhart library. Usually the staff don't care about like the training specifically. Only John actually, you know, it's
Oh,
responsible.
John.